I've said in a previous lesson that it's important that we are willing to change our minds. We shouldn't have such fixed views of the world that we're unwilling to respond to new information. But on the other hand, we also don't want to be easily swayed. We need to have convictions, and we need to make sure that we're discerning of the arguments we hear so that we're not persuaded by flimsy arguments or nonsense or false information. I've written here, if you are going to be convinced by an argument, it should be because the argument is sound. A sound argument is based on fact. It is supported by evidence. It is logical and unbiased. So keep that in mind when you're looking at arguments. I also like this Bible verse, which has a similar theme. We do not want to be like children, carried by the waves and blown about by every shifting wind of the teaching of deceitful men, who lead us into error by the tricks they invent. Both of these statements are about being willing to change your mind, but not easily shaken, not carried along by waves or blown about. You need to have firm convictions, and you need to be discerning in order to be convinced to change your mind based on sound arguments. So, one way that we can prevent ourselves from being easily persuaded is by understanding persuasive techniques. Now, I hope that I believe most of you will have learned about persuasive techniques before. So a lot of these terms, I've just got, how many do I have? 25 here. There's many more, but hopefully you're familiar with most of these. But what I want you to do is have a look at some of these and find 3 that maybe you haven't heard of before, and just do a quick search online, or if you need to, phone a friend. You can contact me if you really need to. And just make sure that you understand those 3. Find 3 you don't know too well, look them up, and try to write your own definition of them. So that's the first thing. Now, we need to be able to not just identify them, but we need to be able to explain them. We need to notice these things and understand how they work so that we can be prepared to respond to them. So I've got a little bit of advice about how we can detect these persuasive techniques and analyze these persuasive techniques. Oh, wrong slide. So I've created a little slideshow here talking about one particular persuasive technique, emotive language. This is quite a generic one. You don't want to overuse it and always talk about emotive language in everything you look at. But because it's generic, I thought it was a good one to use as an example. So I'm going to go through a few things that we can consider for this one particular persuasive technique to help you think about all persuasive techniques. So first of all, what is emotive language? Well, speakers and writers wanting to persuade us to agree with them often try to engage our emotions, and they can do this by including words that carry emotional weight. This can be persuasive because it encourages the reader to respond on an emotional level rather than considering the facts, or it may subtly affect the way the reader views the topic. Now, that's fine, right? And most persuasive techniques are okay, not all of them, but we do need to be able to notice them so that we're not, as I keep saying, easily persuaded. So, the problem with emotive language is that it often involves words that sound like accurate descriptive words, that is, unbiased terms, but they actually carry emotional weight as well. They are biased towards approval or disapproval. So I've got an example. A thin person could be described as slender, which has positive connotations, or emaciated, which has negative connotations, and this will affect how we see them. Those word choices make a difference because we're presenting a biased view. So here's a couple of statements that are neutral. They are unbiased. But if we change a few terms, suddenly it changes how we view the situations being depicted. So with all that in mind, how can we actually analyze these? How can we look at them and detect them and be able to discuss them? Here's an example. So let's say someone's presenting an argument their contention in this argument is that we need harsher punishments for youth offenders who commit acts of violence. That's the argument that's being put forward. The person writing this article might include a sentence: "An innocent bystander had his face shredded by broken glass when the drunken idiot lost control." So in the course of their argument, they've included this sentence. And you can see there are some clearly emotive terms. An innocent bystander. So we have a clear sense of a victim. The word shredded is so visceral, so confronting as a term to describe the injuries. And then to describe the perpetrator of the crime as a drunken idiot clearly positions them in a negative way. So let's analyze that. Now, when we're analyzing persuasive techniques, I try to tell my students we use the power of 3. Let me demonstrate. So this is an okay analysis of this technique, and it includes 3 things. First of all, I've named the persuasive technique. The writer uses emotive language. Number 1, I've named the technique. Number 2, what does that do? This makes the reader feel sorry for the victim, and it makes them angry towards the perpetrator. So 1, emotive language. 2, what does it do? And then the third thing is, how does it make us agree with the writer's contention? Or how is it meant to make us agree with the writer's contention? This makes the reader agree with the contention because we want to see justice for this shocking crime. So you can see 1, 2, 3. So that's a fine analysis that includes 1, 2, 3. Let's check out now an A grade one, and you'll see it contains the same 3 things, but it just provides a lot more detail and specific analysis at each point. The writer uses emotive language. Tick, we have the identifying the technique. To make us feel, so number 2, what effect is it meant to have? To make us feel sympathetic towards the victim and critical of the perpetrator. Now I actually explain how it does that. Describing the victim as an innocent bystander makes us feel sympathetic towards them, as they didn't deserve to get injured, and we may also feel fear, as it could happen to anyone. They're innocent, right? It could happen to anyone. Saying that their face was shredded is very graphic and shocks the reader. We feel disapproval and possibly anger towards the perpetrator as they committed this horrible crime and are nothing more than a drunken idiot. Third point, this makes us agree with the writer's contention. This makes us agree as the violence was severe and we can clearly identify a good guy and a bad guy. By making us angry at the outset of the article, we are less inclined to read the rest of the argument objectively, so we'll be more likely to accept the call for harsher punishments for youth offenders who commit acts of violence. Okay, so see, I've got the same 3 things, but this time I'm unpacking each one, I'm making specific references to the article, I'm digging a little bit deeper. I'm saying by putting this early on, it positions us as the reader in a particular way. So that's how it all works. That's the power of 3, and that's how you can analyze arguments. So in a moment, I'm going to get you to look at a powerful piece of a speech, a powerful text, and I want you to try to identify these persuasive techniques that this speaker, Martin Luther King in the example I'm going to give you, the techniques that this speaker uses and how they are designed to persuade us. And just to finish off, I want to say 2 more things. One is that it's good to be persuasive, right? When you are trying to convince someone, you want the best possible techniques. So it's not inherently wrong to use these persuasive techniques. But as I keep saying, we need to be discerning readers of texts. We need to have thoughtful ears and not accept everything we hear, but we need to understand the techniques that are being used on us so that we can make wise choices. We also need to understand these techniques so that when we are trying to convince someone else, that we have the best tools available so that we can be not manipulative, but thoughtfully persuasive. Okay, I hope you enjoy listening to Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and I hope you feel you've got a good sense and some good strategies for how to analyze these persuasive techniques.